Francis Scott Key, the author of your beloved national anthem, he killed Dr. Reuben Crandall. And do you know who Dr. Reuben Crandall is? Of course you don't. He's an abolitionist. So Francis Scott Key, who's a slave owner, kills Dr. Reuben Crandall, an abolitionist. So the Star-Spangled Banner, that's who Francis Scott Key, old Frank Key, he writes the Star-Spangled Banner, which was originally called the Defense of Fort McHenry. And he did that in 1814, which is 202 years. So this fucking song is over 200 years old. 202 years old. 200 motherfucking years old. And you know what? It's not a good song. So fuck that clumsy British drinking song. Fuck that bulky, confusing, complicated, warmongering, racist bullshit. Amazing Grace is a million times better than that bullshit. Amazing Grace. There you go, Christians. I give you one. I also like Which Side Are You On by Florence Reese, or All You Fascists Are Bound to Lose by Woody Guthrie, or This Land Is Your Land, From California to the New York Island, From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land is made for you and me. It's also a Woody Guthrie song. And all these songs would be a billion, no, it would be a gazillion times better as a national anthem than the Defense of Fort McHenry. Fuck that stupid-ass poem, that racist 1814 poem. And do you all know about that Woody Guthrie's song that he sang about Donald Trump's father? Check it out. It actually turns out that Woody Guthrie, this famous folk singer, had Donald Trump's father as a landlord. And it turns out that Donald Trump's father, when it came to housing, was a racist. So, there's a shocker, right? Trump would have the same issues later on to deal with in his housing. America, fuck yeah, which is a song by Team America. America, fuck yeah! Also, Uncle Sam, Goddamn, by Brother Ali. Brother Ali, both of those songs are good contenders for the new national anthem. America, fuck yeah! That's way better, more patriotic than It's actually the best part of the song, but what's the rest of it? And then what's the other stanzas? Oh yeah, racism. Uncle Sam, goddamn, it is so smooth. Welcome to the United Snakes, home of the thief, land of the slave, grand imperial guard where the dollar is sacred and proud. Come on, let's do this shit for real. Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio. That's a good one too. That is a timeless classic. Timeless. So I just want to issue a side note. Tommy Tomei. So Tomei, oh my God, she is so infuriating. She reminds me of the white woman that Emmett Till whistled at, right? You know Emmett Till? With all of her, faux white supremacist outrage. That's who Tomei Layran reminds me of. So, hey, Tomei, remember what happened to William James Howard in Florida in 1944? When he sent a Christmas card to a white girl? Come on, Willie James Howard, 1944, Florida, he sent a Christmas card to a white girl. You remember what happened to him? Of course you don't. It's weird how a bunch of the lynchings of black men, or boys, for that matter, start out because some privileged cunt just starts bitching about nothing. Like having a Christmas card sent to them, or being whistled at, or argued with, which was the case with David Walker, whose entire family was murdered in western Kentucky. Or when a quarterback who sat down during a shitty, racist 1814 song. Just bitching about nothing. Privileged cunt. Yeah, like you've had a struggle. Get the fuck out of here. You have, 50 guys right around the corner ready to lift you up? And probably have female friends who are good listeners and show emotional support for you. Must be nice. Must be nice. So anyways, I'm sure Tomei Leran, she won't like this, but it actually turns out that the truth about the Star-Spangled Banner is that it's racist as fuck. And so was its author, Francis Scott Key, who himself was a smug white supremacist piece of shit when he called his African brethren a distinct and inferior race of people. But he was also a descendant of generations of slave owners. Generations! And he was a slave owner himself. So all that wealth that his family had helped Francis Scott Key to, I guess, continue the oppression. And Francis Scott Key didn't just say black people were inferior, but he said that blacks and whites integrating and intermingling amongst one another in common humanity was the greatest evil afflicting communities, the greatest. Old Frank Key helped to organize the first meeting of the American Colonization Society in 1817, which sent some 2,000 folks to Africa. So that's what Francis Scott Key's solution was to the Negro question. Ship them all back to Africa. But definitely do not liberate them. Don't you fucking liberate them. Nor talk about liberating them. Nor write words down on pieces of paper and pass them around. Don't you dare do that. In fact, don't even have any pieces of paper that has the words free the slaves on it inside your own home in a private lockbox. Don't you dare do that. Not here. Not in these United States. Francis Scott Key, old Frank Key, the author of the Star-Spangled Banner, the great national anthem, the defense of Fort McHenry. It's a racist song by itself, on its face. It celebrates the slaughter of the black Marines during the War of 1812 at the sack of Baltimore at the Battle of Fort McHenry. Yeah, sure, the black people suck, or the British suck, but not as much as the black British. They were the worst. Oh my God. Holy shit. Read the third stanza of the Star-Spangled Banner. So he hated the British, but particularly he hated the black British, the black Marines. And he was probably shocked by them, considering they're an inferior race and all. So why did the black Marines fight for the British? Tomei, Tommy, do you know? Do you have any idea? For freedom. That's why they fought on the side of the British, for freedom. And it also turns out, Tomei, you don't know this, I guarantee you, you don't know this shit. Being a racist, white supremacist bitch and all. Stupid bitch, dumb bitch. God, that is liberating. Hillary Clinton's a bitch, too. Now, Jill Stein, she is wonderful, sweet, and kind and decent. She actually uses her white feminine privilege to fight for the underprivileged and the oppressed, the poor. Taking on the war machine, standing up to the racist police. So many things. The Green New Deal, I could go on and on. Ending the war on drugs. She'd be a dream. That's the only really saving grace that America has is Jill Stein. Which basically means America's fucked. Especially when you have Tomei Leran exciting all the reactionaries. They're all already excited anyways, ready to stop any progress that might happen. Change things? I don't want to change nothing. My life's good. How come yours ain't good? So, the Black Marines, they fought for freedom. That's why there was about 6,000 black folks that went to the British, and they fought on the side of the British during the War of 1812, which was really America trying to take over Canada and also kill a shit ton of Native Americans. There's a contingent of Kentuckians that started from right here, marched all the way up to Detroit to go kill about a dozen different Native Americans. Kentuckians invaded Detroit. They invaded Detroit, and the Native Americans there defended themselves, but they killed, like all the Kentuckians, almost all of them. The Battle of River Raisin, the Battle of Frenchtown, Battle of River Raisin, and it was a famous one, right? It was sort of like Remember the Alamo type deal. Even though we were the ones invading Detroit, Native Americans were defending themselves. About 8 counties in Kentucky were named after those that had been killed at that battle. So we don't just honor the losers, we honor the racist, imperialist, invading losers who got murdered. So, you know, Trump makes some sense. Yeah, that's not heroic to get captured. It's not heroic to get killed, especially over absolutely nothing. To invade Canada, to take over Canada's land. How'd that work out for you all? Henry Clay? Henry Clay was a big war hawk. 60% of Kentuckians died because of Henry Clay's fucking war. And what happened in the War of 1812? Status quo antebellum. Meaning everything, all the boundaries and the relations went back exactly the same as when it started. So, if you want to be generous, it was a tie. If you want to be generous. But I'm not going to be generous. It's a lot of bloodshed, a lot of dead Kentuckians, a lot of Tecumseh got killed, the White House got burnt down. That was a loss. That was a loss for America. So, even today, Canada celebrates the War of 1812 as part of their nationalistic independence, of them coming about, them becoming their own people. So that's their War of Independence, when the fucking Americans tried to take over their land. So, that's a little historic knowledge about the War of 1812, but guess what? It wasn't just the War of 1812 that the British offered refuge for ex-slaves. There's a strong argument that says that George Washington, the reason why he fought against the British during the so-called Revolution, George Washington's war, it's his fucking war. But the reason why he jumped into the Revolution, because he wasn't for it. He thought that they were breaking, private property when it comes to the Boston Tea Party. And I'm not for sure what he thought about the Boston Massacre, but John Adams defended the British soldiers at the Boston Massacre. So during George Washington's war, the reason why, what got George Washington to say, you know what, fuck this British. He's been a British man, a British soldier. He's the one that started the French and Indian War. He'd been fighting with the British. He got so much land and wealth because he was a British soldier. So why would this British man fight against his paymaster, against his king? How dare George Washington fight against? Why did he fight against his king? Well, go back to Lord Dunmore's Emancipation Proclamation. The first Emancipation Proclamation ever issued in these United States, Tomei, would be Lord Dunmore's. And Lord Dunmore, they're having a battle, with the rebels, and then he says, listen, y'all need to, listen to the British. I'm the royal governor. I'm the fucking monarch. I'm the chief around these parts. Or I'm going to liberate your damn slaves, and I'm going to attack you assholes. That's Lord Dunmore's Emancipation Proclamation. Well, when George Washington said, wait a second, you're going to liberate our slaves? George Washington, he died with 318 slaves. So he's like, holy shit, he first got them when he was like 10 years old. He got like 20 of them or some shit. So George Washington's like, wait a second. You're going to liberate my slaves? How fucking dare you, Lord Dunmore? It's over. This shit's over now. We gotta have a fucking revolution. Fuck this bullshit. Lord Dunmore's lost his goddamn mind talking about liberating slaves and shit. That's why George Washington fought the American Revolution, to protect his ownership of his 318 African-American slaves. So George Washington owned slaves, so did Francis Scott Key. And frankly, if Colin Kaepernick wanted to just sit down for the national anthem just for that reason alone, it's written by a fucking slave owner. He owned one slave in 1800, and then by 1820, old Frank Key had 6 human beings, black people, that he kept in bondage. Black people he thought was inferior. And it wasn't just in black people that would get his ire and his contempt, but it was white people who believed that black people were human beings too. The abolitionists, the William Lloyd Garrisons of the world. So, you know, Colin Kaepernick wants to have a silent, sit-down protest one day and then kneel the next day. Good. He could do that. He don't have to stand up for this racist piece of shit, this slave-owning piece of shit song. The song of a fucking slave owner. Yeah, let's all sing the song of a fucking slave owner. Don't that sound good? And that was pretty cool, actually. And turns out that that other guy kneeled beside him. He kneeled. The other guy kneeled beside him. But then look at all these jingoistic assholes. Oh, I'm a good American because look at me. I got my hand in my heart, and I just, you know, I love my dear leader. I love my dear leader. Kim Jong-il. I mean, fuck. Could you get any more totalitarian? It's just like Noam Chomsky says. We choose to wear our chains. Being American means to be free. And if you're not defending speech that you don't agree with, then you don't believe in freedom of speech. You don't believe that's a virtue that we should have. Ah, fucking Tommy Leerin. God damn, man. I guarantee you, even if I had videotape, because I was arguing with some people online, even if I had videotape of old Francis Scott Key raping black babies, videotape, evidence, and I put it right in front of their faces, I bet the racist, jingoistic douches will still continue on with the racist, jingoistic douchery. The Tommy Leyrins of the world doesn't change their minds when confronted with evidence. Francis Scott Key owned slaves, 1 in 1800 and then 6 in 1820. You think any of them were women? You think old Frank Key could have raped any of his slaves? He owned 6 people. If you own a human being and it's a beautiful black woman, you think old Frank Key could keep his hands off his beautiful black female slave? How about George Washington? 318 slaves. And have you seen Martha Washington? That is gross. That is disgusting. I wouldn't fuck her with your dick, Tommy. I wouldn't put it past any oppressor anyways to do some heinous shit like that. Old Frank Key himself owned slaves, and he fought against the abolitionists, as well as being an ardent foe against the freedom of speech and the right to privacy. Eventually, old Frank Key would put Dr. Reuben Crandall on trial, a show trial. And while Reuben Crandall was in jail waiting trial, Dr. Reuben Crandall would catch tuberculosis, TB, and he would die shortly afterwards. And why did the state prosecutor of Washington, D.C., Francis Scott Key, capture, imprison, and put Dr. Reuben Crandall, remember that name, and speak it, because to the earth he's still alive. Reuben Crandall, why did Frank Key, slave-owning piece of shit, put Dr. Reuben Crandall on trial? Because some of old Frank Key's slave-catching constables found some abolitionist pamphlets in a private lockbox in his home. And that's it. Reuben Crandall thought that the institution of slavery was bullshit. That's true, but he hated alcohol, drinking even worse. His main thing was stop your drinking. Yeah, slavery's bad, but stop your damn drinking. When it came to Reuben Crandall's anti-slavery views, Reuben Crandall was silent about it. He didn't speak about it. He didn't distribute any of these papers. The crime that Reuben Crandall had committed, according to Francis Scott Key, the author of the Star-Spangled Banner, was that Reuben Crandall had pamphlets in his private possession. Dr. Reuben Crandall had some pieces of paper inside of a box inside of his home, and those papers had scribbles on them about the barbarity of slavery. And that's it. Francis Scott Key, he wasn't just an enemy to the black man or his slaves that he violently oppressed, right? You run away, he had constables that would catch runaway slaves, the origins of the police department. Oh, slave catchers. They're also strike breakers. And that's the reason why Francis Scott Key had Dr. Reuben Crandall killed. And yeah, he didn't kill him directly, but he attacked his reputation with the trial, the United States versus Reuben Crandall, and he pushed for the death penalty. So he wanted Reuben Crandall to be murdered for this piece of paper that he had in the privacy of his own home. He wanted him murdered, but he wasn't successful with getting Reuben Crandall executed. Dr. Reuben Crandall had caught tuberculosis when he was in jail, and then he wound up dying in Jamaica 3 years after the infamous Snow White race riots of 1835 in Washington, D.C. And after the Snow White race riots, that's when old Francis Scott Key would put Dr. Reuben Crandall on trial. So he pushed to have him killed. He hated that he was an abolitionist. He hated his anti-slavery views. So, literally, he didn't literally kill him. No, he didn't. But while he was sitting in jail, awaiting trial, because the prosecutor said that this was a bad man, Reuben Crandall caught tuberculosis. And that's what he would die of in Jamaica 3 years later. So no, Frank Key didn't literally kill Dr. Reuben Crandall. But then again, yeah, he did. So let's start from the beginning. I want to tell this story. The year was 1835, and Washington, D.C. in the 1830s was growing fast. Okay, so we're back before the Civil War. This is 1835. Some people even say that the Civil War was a 30-year conflict with only violence happening at the end of the last 5 years. So we're talking about the beginning of that 30-year conflict, 1835. So Washington, D.C. is growing fast in the year of 1835. It used to be just a dirt road with a few houses, but in 1835, Washington, D.C. had a population of 20,000 people. So it's growing quickly. The majority of black folks living in Washington, D.C. were free blacks. 25 years before South Carolina fired the first shots of the Civil War at Fort Sumter, the majority of black folks living in Washington, D.C. were free. Most of the black people, I'm going to say it again because this is, most black people in Washington, D.C. in 1835 were free blacks. The location of where Washington, D.C. itself would be located was a political decision. It had been speculated that the federal capital should be on the Susquehanna River in between Pennsylvania and Maryland. But the slave owners and their politicians didn't like that because Pennsylvania had almost abolished slavery for everybody by 1800. And the slave owners and their politicians in Congress did not want to have the capital of these United States on free territory. Just symbolically, this would suggest that there's something wrong with the institution of slavery, and so the slave owners and their politicians pushed Alexander Hamilton to move the capital site further south and cut it a federal district out of Maryland and Virginia where slavery was legal. For the time being, slave owners were happy with this arrangement since this preserved the legitimacy of slavery. So understand that, the symbolism of Washington, D.C., like the fact that marijuana is legalized there. That's, that's the capital, and it's legal there. In fact, wasn't that guy in Cincinnati at UC? He was murdered because he had marijuana on him. How many people's lives have been ruined because you're all stupid fucking constables and your war on drugs? During the 1830s, free blacks would outnumber slaves in Washington for the first time. Entrepreneurs of color were running restaurants, driving horse-drawn taxis. Does that ruin it? I think I should have turned my cell phone off. Looks like it's quiet now. Okay. I'm going to take a break here, actually. But we're going to get into the story of Dr. Reuben Crandall, the U.S. versus Dr. Reuben Crandall. And Tommy Lehran, you can go fuck yourself, you stuck-up, smug, privileged piece of fucking crap. Fuck you. And fuck Francis Scott Key. Fuck you, slave-owning, racist, white supremacist, low-life motherfucker.